One, two.
So, Emmy, I'm really excited actually to talk to you today because I watched the film that you recommended to me last week, Problemista, which I thought was really great for a lot of different reasons. And we both this weekend saw Beetlejuice.
Woo!
Beetlejuice!
I'm so glad you watched Problemista. For those of you who haven't listened before, this is our vinyl and VHS club where we talk about movies and music and anything you might find in a buy, sell, trade record store. Um, all topics, including entertainment.
Just like you would hang out in a place like that back in the day and actually have conversations with people who would turn you on to maybe artists that you wouldn't listen to or movies you hadn't thought about before. My first job when I was in high school was actually working in a record store. And I know as both of us are musicians and have been in many, many record stores and many video stores too over the years, there's just kind of something that's been lost with these places going away. So
We're trying to get
I'm,
that back. We're trying to
yeah,
get that back. And also, for those of you who don't know, Erin and I are both musicians. Erin is a writer director, an
yep.
actor, and I'm a creative director and musician. And we are in the band Guns and Hoses together, where Erin plays Axel Hose and I am Lizzie Stradlin.
Yeah, which is a super fun project.
So I say let's get right into it. We'll talk about the two movies and then a little bit about music at the end today. And so go for it, Erin. What did you think of Beetlejuice? Beetlejuice.
So I am a huge Tim Burton fan, and
Yes.
I knew the minute that I saw the preview that this film was going to be coming out that I was going to be there. There was like no question to me.
Yes.
Um, I thought it was good. You know, it was good. I didn't leave feeling mad, which I thought was a possibility, to be honest. The marketing for for this movie has been so intense. It feels like uh a lot. Like
Well, yeah, well, it
like
is Halloween coming up, so there's like they're
yeah,
definitely
yeah,
piggybacking on the fact that Halloween's spooky, the spooky vibes
totally.
of it all.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I loved that so much of the original cast was there with like that update. I love that Winona Ryder was in it, reprising her role. I love Beetlejuice,
Mike
Michael
Michael
Keaton.
Keaton.
Yes, I
Mhm.
love that Michael Keaton was Beetlejuice again. Um, I love that Catherine O'Hara was in it. There was just so many great nods to the original film, the same house, the same rules that were applying then applied to the whole world within Beetlejuice now. I really enjoyed even the real estate agent is the same real estate agent from the
Yeah, I
first one.
noticed that. I noticed
Yeah.
that.
And
That
I
made me
and I
happy
I
too.
loved that. I loved that. And I
Yeah.
think like there really is something uh to be said about like keeping things the same and
Yeah.
keeping, that kind of, I don't know, like feel to the whole thing, which they were going to do. But without giving too many spoilers away, um,
So we have to talk about the fact that he wrote the Maitlands out, the original ghost characters that were in the attic.
yeah, which I think is kind of understandable because ghosts aren't supposed to age. So it's kind of like, how do you have your ghost actors? Like, are you going to do a CGI thing? And I think it
Yeah,
also was
that's
kind
true.
of, yeah, and I think it was also kind of fun focusing the story more on Lydia and what's happened to her as a
Yeah.
kid who grows up in this house with ghosts.
Yeah.
Um, and the relationship between her and Beetlejuice
Yeah.
as like a focus point, I thought was a great way to kind of continue the whole thing along.
Yeah.
Um, I really loved Jenna Ortega.
Was great.
She was fantastic.
Yeah.
I saw the movie with my husband, and one of the things he said was, wow, seeing Winona Ryder with Jenna Ortega, you've made me really realize what a bad actor Winona Ryder is. And I got so mad at that because I actually really like Winona Ryder, and
I
I loved
love
how,
Winona Ryder.
yeah, and I loved how she played Lydia with pretty much like the same essence in a lot of ways. Yes, less angsty because as a teenager, you know, Lydia's got this little punk rock confidence of like, okay, stepmom, you like this? I'm gonna like that then. Like very
Yeah.
defiant to this artsy stepmother she has. And there's kind of this like lovely little candy in their relationship of how that they can play off of each other with that.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of like, how does that person grow up? Well, they become an adult and real world demands happen, different things happen, and you know, you change. That's just
Yeah.
the truth. But the essence of who you are is still always there.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was phenomenal. I also really loved the guy who played the love interest for Jenna Ortega
Oh
slash.
yeah, yeah, her like boyfriend, but we won't, I guess.
We won't
I
give
mean,
away a little bit of a spoiler.
if you haven't seen it yet, like I don't know, maybe this one isn't exactly for you.
If you want no spoilers.
No spoilers at all. If you need it to be a full surprise. Yeah, so I felt like I loved it. I really enjoyed the whole thing. A lot of like, I loved the nostalgia. I loved being like, oh, that was in the first one. Oh, that was in the first one. And seeing, you know, like the real estate agent and so forth. I thought it was a really interesting the way that the character Lydia Winona Ryder's character, what she went on to do with her life, and which is she becomes a spooky talk show host. Which I mean, there's what better way to make lemonade out of lemons. I just thought that was a positive look at it. A few things really stuck out to me, which was that there were like effects in this one. Like in the original, obviously the CGI and so forth wasn't developed really. And they had to be a little bit more creative about the effects. So it's campier. The first one's a lot campier. It's hard to be as campy when you have the ability to make anything look amazing in this one. So I did feel a little bit of that slickness in this one, and that felt like later Tim Burton kind of movies. But regardless, I felt like it wasn't tacky or anything. I felt like it was really good. And the truth is like Beetlejuice appealed to us when we were teenagers, and you know what I mean? And this one is going to appeal to teenagers today. So there has to be something taken into account of like, of, you know, what's fun for teenagers to watch. And, you know, so I thought they did a really good job of making it fun for us, the original Beetlejuice generation, and for the like new teenage audience of Beetlejuice. I thought it was just really cute across the board. Catherine O'Hara plays Delia, Winona Ryder, or Lydia's stepmother, and she's married to Lydia's father, who did not appear in this sequel because he was in trouble for allegations. He got canceled for inappropriate allegations with teenagers. So it's a good thing they didn't include him, but I will say that they did a good job of sort of including the character without actually having to have him in it. He has been you know, all the charges have been dropped against him, but you know,
Jeffrey Jones.
Yeah, it was that, which is sort of a bummer. Yikes. So I couldn't stop thinking about that the whole time. I like randomly read an article right before I saw it that said that, and I was like, great. But
wow, okay.
So me and my husband walked to this like really small theater we have in our neighborhood where we see a lot of movies, and it's not like the nicest movie theater. It's one of those like cute old indie ones, but it's close by, and so we walk in. Anyways, we saw it there with like 6 other people in the theater, and we saw it with a bunch of 10-year-olds whose parents must have like dropped them off, and they loved it. They were just going nuts the whole time. It was like,
really,
yeah, it was really cute. So I was like, okay, so this is really spanning. Oh, and another thing you and I talked about is people were like dressing up to go see this movie. Did you see anybody in costumes?
I did. I did. I saw a
You
couple
did?
people. Yeah, which I thought was really cute. I loved it. I saw one woman, she was wearing a big black and white striped coat,
Yeah,
which I thought was great.
cute.
Um, yeah. I mean, I laughed out loud. Did you? There
Yeah.
was definitely moments.
Oh
I
yeah, I
mean,
laughed out loud a lot. I felt like
oh,
Nick
yeah.
is 7 years younger than me, and he didn't particularly get the first one.
That's so funny. Yeah. So Bobby is 7 years older than me. So
Yeah,
he didn't, he did not laugh, actually. We were in the theater and
yeah.
I would
Nick didn't
burst out
laugh
laughing
either.
and he did not laugh. And I don't know, he then was asking me all these different questions just kind of about the world of
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
And why did they say his name 3 times? And then why is she saying his name 3 times again?
yeah,
And these different things that they kind of established in the first one, which in case people aren't familiar with it, if you say Beetlejuice 3 times, he appears. But if you want him to go away, you have to then say Beetlejuice 3 times again.
yeah.
So it summons him and it sends him away. Um,
I never knew that Beetlejuice was a demon.
yeah,
They never said that though in the first one.
yeah, they
So
did.
Beetlejuice, they said he was a demon.
Yeah,
Are you
he's not
sure?
like a normal ghost. Yeah, yeah.
A ghost, but demon is different than ghost.
Demon is definitely different than ghost, but he's considered a demon.
Wow, it's so interesting. I was like, whoa. I thought he was just like a naughty ghost.
Well, yeah. I mean,
I guess that's what a
yeah,
demon is.
yeah, yeah, yeah. In some ways, yeah, for sure. Um, but I honestly, I really, really, really loved seeing Michael Keaton again in this role. I think
Yeah.
that considering the wide range of films that he's done as an actor, um, he is just very funny. He's got this great humor about him, and I just
Yeah.
love seeing him in comedy.
He
And
is so he nailed it. And anyways, I've seen a lot of mixed reviews, so I don't know. I guess some people didn't receive it as well as us.
mhm,
But I was like, yeah, but nothing's gonna be like as gritty as something that was made in like whatever. What year was it made? The 90s, so
1988.
1988. So nothing's gonna
Yes.
look as gritty as that. Can't like go backwards. You have to like.
Yeah, and part of the whole original was it was such a new and fresh concept. It wasn't something someone had seen before. You have these two huge stars, Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis, at this moment in their career where both of them are, getting a lot of attention,
Yeah.
and they get killed really quickly in the film, and you realize where we're going, right? You're
Yeah.
not on a normal trajectory of a journey, a story. You're going into this path that's a little bit other, which I think is sometimes people can get on board with that, and other times, often with horror or science fiction, people don't want to buy in. So you have to
Yeah.
kind of already have bought in. And with the appeal of that type of story, you have to you have to have like a little bit of a looseness to like, okay, not all the rules apply from this world to this other world, and we're going to go with that.
Um
Yes.
aesthetically it was unlike anything else. I feel like it had, he has such a Tim Burton has such a distinct aesthetic, and it was, and particularly in this one, because he can tend to go throwback Victorian, a little bit of that stuff, like sort of spooky stuff, but this was so it was future thinking in it, and it was extremely abstract, like everything about it, which I did notice is a slight difference in the first one versus the second one, because like everything was abstract in the first one, the set, the everything. I mean, you were like, look, these shots were like I mean, it was really creative shooting of the first one, which tells me it probably wasn't an enormous budget.
Yeah. So, very insightful.
Yeah.
The Beetlejuice was released in the United States in March 30th of 1988 by Warner Brothers, and it became a huge critical and commercial success. So it grossed $75 million on a $15 million budget, which is
Wow.
awesome, right? So the
Yeah.
theater's like, whoa. And it actually won an Academy Award for Best Makeup. and three,
Wow.
yeah, and 3 Saturn Awards for Best Horror Film, Best Makeup, and Best Supporting Actress for Sylvia Sidney. The film's success spawned an animated television series, which I remember watching as a kid. There was also
I
video
don't remember.
games.
I do not remember the television series.
I do. It was a cartoon. It was really kind of weird. It was like, what? It was a cartoon.
Oh.
And there was the video games, Beetlejuice. And then in 2018 came the stage musical, which I never got a chance to see, but there was Beetlejuice,
Oh.
the musical.
I
Um,
remember. Did it close? It's not playing
uh,
still.
I don't think so, but I think, with anything, the timing of that was not great with pandemic happening
Oh
a
yeah,
few years
sure.
later. And,
Sure, sure, sure.
I'm not really sure, but I remember I didn't have a chance to see it. And I don't know if I really wanted to see it, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
who did wrote the music for the musical? I don't know. That's a nice segue though to the fact that Danny Elfman did this movie too.
yes. So Danny
Yeah,
Elfman, one of my favorite composers, who always works with Tim Burton,
yeah.
who once had been in Oingo Boingo. Danny
Oh
Elfman
yeah,
in
right.
Oingo Boingo.
Oingo
Yeah,
Boingo,
which
which
is
is so funny. This ties into our first podcast too. People go all the way back because we talked about Dick Tracy,
mhm.
and Danny Elfman did that too. That's another Tim Burton movie. So.
Yeah, we love Tim Burton movies.
Mhm.
And so just a little bit more about the Beetlejuice situation. On their opening weekend, they made $8 million, and which was at the time Easter weekend, and that set a new record.
It opened on Easter weekend.
Yeah, yeah,
Weird.
yeah. And it was the 10th highest grossing film of 1988.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
mhm.
I have to tell you something. I bet that Tim Burton and the team decided to release the original Beetlejuice Easter weekend in sort of following in the footsteps of how The Exorcist, basically The Exorcist was spawned a satanic panic in the world, which actually ended up driving people back to the church. And so the Catholic Church did not come out against or call this very scary movie about being possessed. Uh, it actually made the Catholic Church comment on the movie, which actually drove more people to the movie. Basically, the church used it as a sort of warning to get people back into the church, and therefore it ended up being a cross marketing experience. Did I say that clearly? Do you
Yes. So
understand
it
what I'm
was,
trying to say?
yes. So it was one of the factors once it came out. People were so shocked by that film that they went back to church because they were so scared of the devil.
Yes. And so the church loved it and ended up being like, we don't see a problem with people going to see The Exorcist. It's a great. And so that when the Catholic Church comments on a movie, it's like possibly the biggest promotion of a movie possible. So it's
Yeah.
funny. So it's like the original Beetlejuice, they put it out Easter weekend, maybe to scare people in the same way, create a sort of panic, and maybe see if they could kind of get the same momentum, or maybe, you know what I mean? I don't know. That's
So that's
I'm
interesting.
guessing, but
So this was part of something that was referenced in a podcast by Sarah Marshall.
yeah, you were wrong about she wrote a book on the Satanic Panic, and basically in the 80s, late 70s and 80s, people became very, very afraid of the devil again, and a lot of it was just born out of The Exorcist. There had never been a movie made like it. People called it the scariest movie they'd ever seen in their lives, and it is really scary. And it's one of those, maybe we should talk about that. We should rewatch Exorcist next week. But people are afraid of the devil. People are
Yeah,
afraid
yeah,
of
yeah, yeah,
demons.
yeah.
It is a marketing experience. Sort of like how I feel like women watch, murder documentaries and cult documentaries. It's like they're doing research on how not to get murdered.
Right. No,
how not to
totally.
get pulled into a cult. So when
Yeah.
we are watching horror movies, we're like,
Yeah.
how do I not get possessed by the demon Beetlejuice? And we're learning, you know what I mean? Which the first one was definitely scarier. That's something we should. I think the first one was definitely scarier than the
You
second
think
one.
the first Beetlejuice was definitely scarier?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I remember as a kid, I don't think I was too little when it came out to see it in
yeah,
theater.
yeah,
But I remember watching it maybe at a sleepover years later at a friend's house
yeah.
and having moments that it did feel scary, thinking it was a little bit intense.
The
Uh,
scariest scene in the original is the sandworm scene, where he like possesses the house and forces Lydia to marry him in the
yeah,
original one. 16-year-old Lydia to marry
yes.
him in the house.
All the
We
work.
digress. So yeah,
We
Beetlejuice
digress.
was good. Beetlejuice was great, but it was maybe like adapted to our times in a way I didn't expect, but I thought worked, really well. So I loved it. It was like it was a very indulgent watch for me. So
Yeah, I thought it was super fun. And I think one of the parts of that type of movie in general, I love it when films become a little bit surrealist, which brings us
oh
to
yeah.
the other film that we're going to talk about today, which is Problemista.
Problemista. Now I didn't do my background lookup on this. Did you do some background check?
Yes.
Okay, because I
So
I watched it just on a complete whim. I was going down an A24 rabbit hole.
I love it.
Yeah. Anyways, so I watched it and I loved it so much. I was like, Erin, you have to watch this movie. This feels very in the vein of something you might even write yourself. So, anyways, tell me
Oh,
about it.
it's
Let's hear
totally
about it.
totally up my alley. So it was written, directed, and stars Julio Torres,
Mm-hmm.
and he is a Salvadorian American.
Mm-hmm.
He was a writer for Saturday Night Live, as well as a co-creator, writer, and executive producer of the HBO series Los Espookys.
Oh yeah, I've seen ads for that, but I haven't actually watched it.
Yeah, so it's a surrealist comedy. So just really quick, because I'm a film nerd and I studied film when I was in college and then
Yeah.
again later after college. But surrealism is this artistic movement that started really in the beginning of like the moving picture coming about. So it really was a art form that was taking place in France and Paris in the early 1920s. And it beckons on using fast moving images or jarring images to make the viewer kind of uncomfortable. That's one of the definitions of it.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of the craft of surrealism also touches on some of the painting. Obviously, Paris is a cultural hub for the arts.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the stuff that was happening with paintings, Salvador Dali, he's seen as a surrealist painter. In 1945, Hitchcock put out this film and needed to have this dream sequence scene in it, which he knew would need to be of a surrealist nature, which is also touches on the definition of surrealism. So that the belief is that our dreams are never like reality, right? And you can say that from like, there's all this your brain is working stuff out in however ways it is. Hitchcock brought Dolly on to film the dream sequence for his film.
Salvador Dali filmed a scene in a Hitchcock movie. Salvador Dali is the artist with all the dripping clocks.
Yes, Dolly is the one with the paintings with the dripping clocks, and he was really into symbolism. So from the late 1920s, Dolly had progressively gotten into like really bizarre images in his work.
Mm-hmm.
And it was symbolic, which had like open symbolic interpretation. Often people would refer to a Freudian interpretation of what a lot of his paintings were, as they were getting like, stranger with like a female mate praying mantis, eating her mate is part of an early work called the basket of bread that he created.
Wow.
Hitchcock was like, I'm making this movie and I need to have this scene in it, and I really need it to be great. So I'm actually not going to direct this one scene. I'm going to have Salvador Dali come on and direct the scene. And it was for his movie that he put out in 1945 called Spellbound.
Wow.
And it was one of the first American films to use psychoanalysis as a major element in the story. What's really cool also, people who have talked about him or have read a little bit about him as a director, he was pretty controlling with his image and what he wanted to have. So
Yeah.
the fact that he let him kind of do this on his own without the level of micromanagement that he was known for shows the amount of respect and
Respect.
trust that he must have had for him as an artist and a creator.
Yeah, yeah.
The dream sequence in Spellbound, you can actually watch on YouTube if you put in Spellbound Hitchcock dream sequence. The film is owned by Disney, so you can't watch the whole film on YouTube, but you can see a little bit of this dream sequence. And it entails the man sitting in a psychologist's office or psychiatry office.
Uh-huh.
He's talking about his dream, and then we start seeing the dream, and it's absolutely gorgeous. It has all these beautiful curtains, paintings of eyes, things getting cut, just so many layers of imagery on top of each other, but it really paints this gorgeous moment in that film of a dream. Now the film is black
Wow.
and white. I really wish it was in color because I'm sure in real life it was just had so much vividness. But it's really cool to kind of check out. So anyway, surrealism, just to go back on surrealism before we really talk about Problemista,
Yeah.
is the definition of kind of having images incorporated that don't necessarily align with the story in the sense of the logic of the story, but more the emotion and the psychological meaning within them.
Yeah.
Right. So that's where Problemista is getting that surrealism title from. It's also an art form that was very, very popular in South America in film. There's a lot
What
more
is surrealism?
surrealism.
Yeah.
And we can
It's
talk about that more another time.
okay.
But
Yeah.
let's jump into the film. Let's talk about Problemista. Let's talk about your thoughts on it. You loved it. You said, Erin, you got to see it. I saw it.
Yeah. So I feel like maybe I related to it a lot because the main character Alejandro is a New Yorker struggling to stay. Um, he's actually an immigrant, but it's different. You know, he's trying to get his visa to be like solidified by somebody, and he's a toy designer, and he really wants to stay and make his dream of creating toys come true. I loved this sort of, I don't know what the word for it is, but the sort of like sarcasm in the toys he designed. So he's a toy designer, but they have like a dose of reality. So it's like
Yes.
maybe a little girl who got a B- on her test and how she felt up, like a doll about a girl who got a B- on her test, sort of like a little dose of reality.
Yeah. Yeah.
I loved seeing those ideas, and really the story focuses around what he does to stay in New York, all the like his journey of how he stays in New York, and how a big part of him being able to stay was working for this woman who is essentially like the stereotypical crazy artist in New York, who a lot of us have known a crazy artist in New York, who maybe is like blows up their own importance, blows up their peers' own importance. It is their world and you are living in it. Difficult to work for, unrealistic expectations, and how his attitude is just to continue to appease her, and he does it all with a really, really good attitude and a sort of fake it till you make it approach. It ends up working out in his benefit. You know, a lot of people maybe wouldn't have lasted in his position working for this sort of nut bar, I believe.
Oh, girl.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I Tilda Swinton's character, Elizabeth,
Yeah.
reminded me of so many creatives that I have worked for, two bosses in particular. Um, one woman who also had red hair, who was, I want to say nuts, but I don't think that's fair. Uh,
Yeah.
let's say highly
Eccentric.
highly demanding
Yes.
to a illogical degree.
Yeah.
When you're an assistant and you're young, Alejandro's got to be like maybe early 20s, right? It's like he's just busting his butt. And no matter what he does, and he's getting, basically, he's not getting paid by her, he's getting nothing, just the promise that he's going to get sponsorship so he can stay in the country to pursue his real dream. She makes him jump through fire. I mean,
Yeah.
thing after thing, and there
The
is a
things,
little bit of this thing that I think he really appreciates about her, is that he can see inside of her, I think, the deep sensitivity that actually resides there,
yeah.
because she's an art critic, right? And so she has, her gift is to be critical, is the gift.
Yeah.
But that's also the curse, because she can't
Turn
turn
it
it
off.
off. And when she's feeling cornered, it's like she turns it on more. And you kind of feel, it was almost like the two of them had kind of like a romance in a way,
Mhm.
like you really
He
felt
saw
like
her. He saw her.
he saw her. He
And
really saw her.
she saw him,
Mhm.
I think. Um they needed each other for,
Mhm.
yeah, she needed someone deeply patient, and he needed her help to do sort of make the impossible happen, which that's sort of a thing, is like we call these people who are eccentric, these ladies, these artists, these people who are reaching for impossible things, but like
Mhm.
they make it happen sometimes, and he needs somebody who's going to make it happen. Like that's part of getting older. I've sort of noticed is that all the things I used to judge in people who I thought were just being who are stuck in their ways or whatever, I mean, there are some truths that stay. There are some universal truths that exist no matter how modernized the world. I'm thinking specifically of the scene that she gets stuck on using this specific software that she thinks is the industry standard. And
Oh
she
my
wants,
God.
it made me laugh. Sorry. She wants him to use a specific software for a filing system, but
Yeah.
like
FileMaker Pro. FileMaker
FileMaker
Pro.
Pro, but everybody's just using Google Sheets and Google Drive at this point, but she's stuck on this like industry software of FileMaker Pro that's sort of
Right.
outdated. And how ridiculous it is that she's sort of stuck on it, and it's, they're constantly sort of making fun of how it's like, well, she's acting archaic, but
Yeah.
really um he starts to, over time, that while that might be silly, right, he starts to
Mhm.
see over time that a lot of the things that she sort of hyper focuses on or gets stuck on, she has her reasons for, and that maybe they aren't so eccentric, and that it's both. You can be unreasonable and get amazing things done because you refuse to accept, reasonable defeat. That's what the attitude he had to have to get himself an opportunity to stay. And I mean, we haven't even talked about how her artist husband decided to freeze himself. Like that's the surreal sort of side of this whole story, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I love the premise of that, and as a concept, and I believe there's celebrities today who've also already frozen themselves,
So
possibly, or at
tell
least
them
that was a
about that.
rumor. So there's a cryogenics facility in which Alejandro is working, and they have sponsored his visa. And his job is pretty much just sit in the room with the guy who's frozen and kind of do whatever you want, just make sure the machine is plugged in and whatever. And he gets distracted slightly one day, trips over the wire and it unplugs the backup generator for the guy's machine, and he plugs it back in, but somebody has walked in and they were like, did you unplug the machine? Did you unplug the machine? Which leads to his dismissal from the company. As he's going up to the office of the head boss, Elizabeth has walked in complaining about what's happening for her husband, who is the frozen artist that Alejandro sits in a room with day in and day out. And she's, yelling about this. She's yelling about this. Anything you say to her, she comes at you, she comes at you, she comes at you. And the woman who's running the facility is just kind of very overwhelmed, doesn't really want to deal with her. If anyone in the world has worked in customer service, you have met someone like this before, where you understand it's not rational what they're talking about. It's so further and such on an emotional level that you can't use any logic. They just want to yell. So you just kind of have to sit there and like deal with it a little bit.
Yeah.
But she's, won't back down, won't back down, won't back down, won't back down, and doesn't see anybody else's point of view except her own. And Alejandro sees her, kind of recognizes, wow, that's intense. She leaves. She says she's going to come back or something. She's arguing over the bill. And that in that little exchange, money is kind of an issue for her. And this place is very expensive. And a frozen person is kind of also putting a lot on that person, which kind of, it also says something about the relationship she has with her husband, that he would just dump that on her a little bit. Mm-hmm. And you realize throughout the film, the relationship that Bobby and Elizabeth has had, in which he kind of takes her for granted a little bit. But as he was one of the few people that ever really got to see her, like accepted her for who she was, in essence, she has a level of loyalty and love for him that isn't going to change no matter what. Which I think is a beautiful thing, and is also in a way that Alejandro's mother has a level of deep love for her son, but fear of the world that he's going into. She's also an artist, and in the beginning,
I loved their conversation. So he's calling his mom back home, and she's worrying about him. She never stops trying to help him, but she's an artist, and she's just beautiful. Her work is beautiful. The way they sort of constantly film her in this like golden sort of light, because she's sort of like an angel to him, I think. Mm-hmm. And like artistically across the board, this movie is really, I love it because it kind of shifts between like stark reality, mm-hmm. And everything's really sort of cold and real life colors, what would be in like natural light or whatever. And then it will shift to these really sort of like saturated colors, these really sort of sparkly sort of colors. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that stays with me. It's like when I think of that movie, I think of it being like highly saturated, like just beautiful colors, everything. Like the toys were colorful, the art is all colorful, because we're looking at a lot of art in this movie because it's about a art curator, crazy artist, husband, and so forth. And sort of how artists can be all kind of vastly different people. Like they aren't all irrational eccentrics, like mm-hmm. his mother's a poignant, sensitive, she's just a sensitive, caring, deep feeling, passionate woman, and there's that kind of artist too in the world. And it's not unreasonable to make things around your feelings. It's actually quite reasonable and healthy. Anyways, I just thought it was a beautiful movie across the board, and without like getting too into all the details, because this movie is about the details. It's sort of in the minutia, and so we don't want to like ruin all the minutia for, I mean, all the like little bits. It's sort of a slice of life, slice of the main character's life, and the little details are what makes it like sort of interesting and very relatable and somehow still very surreal.
Mm-hmm.
He's going into his subconscious an awful lot
Yeah.
in this
The
movie.
the scenes where the two of them are fighting. So one of the things that Bobby had called Elizabeth behind her back was the Hydra. And a Hydra is a mystical creature. It's a dragon with multiple heads. And so every time a head gets cut off, another one grows in its place. And the feeling was, as you fight with her, she just comes back with more. She'll come back with more. You're never going to defeat this like dragoness, so to speak. And I loved when she was arguing with Alejandro, and she's dressed like a dragon and he's dressed like a knight. And no matter what happens, it's like she's coming back with another thing. She's coming back with another thing. She's got all this, ways to just strike him down, strike him down, strike him down. And it's not until later when he calls her about getting that show and he's able to push through the vulnerability of, look, but you need money.
Yeah.
Like, Elizabeth, you can come up with every excuse in the book, but you need money.
Yeah.
If you want to keep Bobby frozen, and which is what they both need. They both need money.
Right.
He needs the money to stay in the country. She needs the money to keep Alejandro frozen and apparently herself, even though she was not ill. So therefore she couldn't be cryogenically frozen, but she became that. And part of that was also that it's assisted suicide, pretty much.
Yeah.
Because they have to be dead to be put into this frozen state. So
I was just gonna say that in response to the Hydra comment, that's like precisely who you want to have on your side. You want to have somebody who keeps coming back fighting for you, not
relentless,
with you, but for you. So that's what makes her lovable too, because she will fight for you. So
she will fight for you, and she teaches him to do that for himself.
You're not wrong. It ties into Beetlejuice. Like, these are some surreal movies, and it felt like something that could have been made, 20 years ago. It felt a little timeless to me, which is cool.
Emma Stone was also a producer under her Fruit Tree banner.
Wow. Oh, and by the way, you said he was a writer on Comedy Central. This movie is hilarious. It is so funny.
It is very funny. Yeah, there's so many moments. If you've ever had any touch into the art world, especially the art world in New York, and the weirdness of it and the snarkiness and the classism of it, and you just really,
there's like so much BS, like everything, like some people are so full of BS. Oh, it's like, and then sometimes they're not, and it's like there's so much schmoozy, and it's like everything is like a coin toss. Is this like, if I'm gonna just, you have to throw everything at the wall and see what sticks, and it's like you never know what you're dealing with, and that's sort of part of signing up for being in this world. Some stuff makes it through, some projects make it through, some don't, and so forth.
Let's talk about what you've been listening to. What's in your ears?
So tell me, Erin, when I say Brat Summer, when I ask you how did your Brat Summer wrap up, what do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
You do. So Brat Summer, for those of you who don't know, is sort of like, it's taken from the Charlie XCX album called Brat, and the album cover is this sort of apple green color with a outdated font, like what's a font? What's an old font? The classic font, like
Times New Roman.
Comic Sans. Roman. Yes, it's like Comic Sans lowercase, and it says Brat. It's like hilarious. So, anyways, it's sort of become a term that is all encompassing of all the female artists that sort of are nailing it right now and all through summer. And going into fall, it's going to be interesting to see how these artists evolve. But specifically, Charlie XCX, who coined the term, and Chapel Roan, who is like blowing up. She's very talented. And Sabrina Carpenter, who is maybe the cheekiest of them all in messaging, but maybe the least sort of cheeky in actual style. She has sort of more of a smoothed over pop sound, but like the lyrics are quite biting. Sarcastic, tongue-in-cheek lyrics. She has the song Espresso. You know that song?
Everybody knows that song.
Oh yeah.
If you've ever been in a public place, you've definitely heard espresso at this point in your life. Yeah.
The lyric is, "You say you can't sleep, baby, I know. It's that me espresso." So she's saying she keeps him up at night. And even the way she sings it is so funny. She's like, "You say you can't sleep, baby, I know. It's that me espresso." So it's like, anyways, so she's tongue in cheek. Her more recent song, "Please, Please, Please," sort of reminds me of a naughty Dolly Parton. The chorus is, "Please don't prove I'm right. Heartbreak is one thing, my ego's another. I beg you don't embarrass me, motherfucker." She says motherfucker in a song, which I think is quite interesting and brave. And it's this like sort of slick pop song. Then Chapel Roan, who is like, she's sort of blazing a trail in the LGBTQ community, as somebody herself who identifies that way. And the way she says it, she just wants to throw huge parties for gay people. That's what she wanted her concerts to be. But her record is slamming. I mean, it's
so good.
So good. It's by Dan Nigro, Nigro. Anyways, he's a producer.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to say it, but yeah.
He co-wrote it with her. And I just thought you might think this is interesting. Is like, so there's a lot of talk on, how that Chapel Roan sort of stayed in the industry a long time. She just kept fighting. She got dropped twice by her record labels, moved home back to the Midwest one time from LA, thinking she was going to give up. She's only 25. So let's just
everybody take a breath.
Everyone, 25 is very young.
Yeah.
Not giving up after being sort of pushed around and dropped. I mean, I have respect for that a lot. But she is proof that if you keep going and you keep trying, things can happen. I will say that what's very interesting to me about her story and what I love about this relationship she has with her producer, Dan, he's responsible for the Olivia Rodrigo record that won like a bazillion Grammys, Driver's License, and all those songs. He produced her as well. The record label she got signed to wouldn't believe in her, and Dan believed in her so much that he created his own record label, signed her to it, and just kept pushing and pushing and pushing. His label became major because of her, and she's getting major support. Like the booking agencies and all that stuff are essentially going to blow up this guy's label because she's so successful.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so I thought that was a happy story to tell. So often in this music industry, it's like, there's a lot of talk about Nepo babies this day. That's always existed. It seems like this generation is super, like Gen Z's super aware of that in a way that maybe we weren't. They don't love that part of the record business, which is, as artists and musicians, that's always quite frustrating. I'm not super judgmental of inherited crafts, if you're good, you're good to me.
Yeah, the cream rises to the top.
Yeah, the cream rises to the top, but you know, there's a lot of really talented people out there. And so someone might say it's unfair for somebody who's got family in the business to be who's picked. But I mean, that happens all the time in every business.
Yeah. But does Chapel Roan
And
have
Chaperone
family?
doesn't, and so Chaperone doesn't have any of that. And so
Yeah.
that's
Which I
sort of
think is
what
part of why she's also popular. I mean, to bring
people
up
love that.
Sabrina, yeah, to bring up Sabrina Carpenter again, she was a Disney kid. I mean, she was on
I
that show,
know.
Girl Meets World, and there is something about her super sleek packaging. She's super cute. She's got a little bit of a Marilyn Monroe vibe with the
Yeah.
sexiness, but it's a little bit demure. And that's very put together by a team, I think.
Oh
Nothing
yeah.
wrong with that. I
No.
also want to state that I don't believe there's anything inherently wrong with having talented people on your team help you look good. Um, there's nothing wrong with that. I think that there's also like a backlash sometimes that artists face when they are really well packaged that isn't necessarily fair either, because it is such an incredibly difficult industry,
Yeah.
and an industry you and I have both been in and dealt with in different ways. And it's really hard and it asks a lot of you.
Yeah.
That's one of the things also that I think is kind of refreshing hearing about um, uh, the pushback that Roan is giving on people thinking they can just come up and like touch her or get a picture with her
Yeah.
or whatever this is. These like assumptions that once you're in the public eye or you're part of the public zeitgeist that the public owns you, and that's just not true.
Yeah.
I think that, especially as we live in this moment of an overabundance of influencers who show you every aspect of their lives of reality television. That's, we're in this moment of like the deep
Yeah. Oh
overshare.
yeah.
But that does not give you the right to think that these people who maybe are sharing with you, and I don't think is doing that level of deep share, but
Yeah.
regardless, every human being has their own boundaries that when you're in the room with them, they're allowed to set.
Yeah, so
And
like 5 years ago, there was like a trending thing on the internet because social media responds to extreme emotion.
mm,
Those extreme emotions get promoted in posts on social media. And so there was a sort of trend of radical vulnerability, and a lot of people got pulled into it. I will say that I did at one point, but I think it's because it can be very easy for people who are um, emotive and writers and artists and people who like love to express. It was quite easy to get pulled into that.
can
But
you
there,
can you describe a little bit more just for people who don't understand what you mean by the trend of radical
yeah,
vulnerability?
so radical vulnerability is essentially sharing your experiences, anything, the emotion behind it, and sort of overshare is a bit judgmental, I'd say, but sort of just putting all of your feelings out on the internet to share your experience. I think the intention behind radical vulnerability was
So that people
came
felt less alone in their own
came from a good
experiences?
place. Yeah, absolutely. Came from a good place. But there was this moment of backlash before there were protections in place on the internet of people sort of taking advantage of that radical vulnerability and using it against the people who overshared. There was a sort of explosion of bots. It's true. I mean, we all sort of experienced the bot craze there for a moment where people were just like, I mean, where bots were like commenting rude things on any relevant hashtags. Like they were looking for vulnerable hashtags to specifically go in and sort of attack vulnerable people. So that radical vulnerability backfired on an entire, generation and audience. And social media like influencers. It highly backfired on a bunch of them. And um, anyways, it invoked criticism and you know, you can be a radically vulnerable person, but the number of people you are sharing with when you start getting a platform, it radically it exponentially grows the feedback you are going to be getting from the audience. So
Mm.
there's nothing wrong with being an expressive and emotive person, but you have to understand what you're stepping into when you grow a platform or you get in the public eye. And uh, there's been an attitude for a long time that people who have a platform or who are going to be in the public eye should expect or deserve to be sort of yelled at or criticized or